Coming up on this week's episode of TechSNAP, the RSA security leak has revealed the dirty underbelly of the professional security industry. Find out why this story seems like it's straight out of Hollywood. And then after that, it's time for your questions and our answers. We'll give you tips on how to plan for server failures gracefully and how to get started on building your own website cheap, free, and fast. All that and more on this week's episode of TechSNAP. Hi everyone and welcome to TechSNAP. My name is Chris and this episode was shot live on August 18th for release on August 19th. And joining me live on the Skype line like every single week is Alan. Hey there Alan, how you doing?
I'm doing good, Chris.
Now TechSNAP, for those of you who are new, first of all, welcome. You're our favorites. And this show really goes in depth with technical topics of the week. And sometimes we even do Q&A. And that's what this episode's really all about, is our audience is sending in questions. And we're going to feature a ton of them in this episode, which means if you haven't gotten a chance to see TechSNAP before, you might not know some of the great in-depth coverage we do. So you'll want to tune in for that because we also have some news coming up. And then next week, we want to hear your thoughts on your network monitoring and server monitoring because we're going to do an episode all about that. Now, Alan, you have an epic Nagio setup, right?
I do. It's like 320 services across 65 hosts.
So we're going to talk a little bit about that next week. And then we've also got like a question that you're going to have a couple of different answers for every week, right? Or one answer every week for a little while?
Yeah.
Is that what it is?
Basically a question that has so many possible answers that I can't cover them all at once.
That's so geeky, man. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So why don't we get through our big news story of this week? We really wanted to cram this one in here, even though it's a Q&A episode, because really it's kind of a follow-up of a story that we've been covering for weeks now. Yep. And Alan, you kind of paraphrased it really well on the live stream. I should say, TechSNAP is done live at jblive.tv at 1 p.m. Pacific on Thursdays over jblive.tv. And you can always go over there. We have a countdown right before the show starts. There's also a calendar you can check out if you want to catch us live and then join us in our IRC. And on the live stream earlier, you were saying this story creeps you out, right?
Yep. Yeah, and specifically, if you watch the live stream, you tend to get a little bit more because you see the bit as a pre-show and a post-show, and you get to help us come up with the name for the episode.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. So this first story we were chatting about, and we said that this guy in the picture here kind of reminds us of you a little bit. So let's just go here. So this is an exclusive leak here that says that the RSA dump appears to be authentic, and in fact, it's been exploited. And we'll get into some of that. But if you're watching the video version, you got to check out the picture of the guy they chose to use in this. There's a little similarity there. There's a little bit of similarity. All right, Alex. So what's going on here? Could you do a quick paraphrase on what was the whole RSA token story to begin with, maybe as a reminder to people? Do you remember the details there?
Yeah. Some party managed to break into the RSA servers and steal the secret salt for their little authentication tokens. Their tokens provide two-factor authentication. So on top of a password, you need this little code that changes every 10 seconds. And that code is generated using cryptography, but originally it comes from some secret salt in the beginning. Mm-hmm. And by breaking into RSA and stealing those, they managed to duplicate a token and use that to break into the network of Lockheed Martin, where they managed to make off with undisclosed files.
Yeah.
Likely highly secret, and that's why they won't tell us what they made off with.
Because Lockheed is a huge government contractor. Government contractor. So you know they've got some good docs to get your hands on there.
Exactly. And over the last couple of weeks, we've been hearing about this 5-year operation by the Chinese government to break into various corporations. And this data dump, which purports to be from an RSA employee, in the article we link, they can't prove that it was actually an RSA employee, but the data itself does appear authentic. Yeah,
and there's a pastebin dump of it up that goes through, and they talk about, in this dump, they talk about like people that are using it to do commercial transactions and things like that, of like to not to use the data itself, but use the data as value and leverage to sort of almost like mafia style get people to pay them so they don't leak it and things like that. It sounds like there's an entire black market to this stuff.
Right. So what the dump contains is a list of host names and IP addresses. Those host names correspond to the address the infected computers will go to get their newest configuration file. So the virus or malware that's on the exploited machines will go to that host name and get a configuration file telling it where to look for new commands for the command and control system, right? Because they have to keep moving those because they get shut down.
And what's kind of interesting is that little bit of information was apparently either uncovered by H.B. Gary, which some of you might remember, or H.B. Gary's team, and he makes the assertion that every single host name in this pastebin dump is an exploited machine. And these exploited machines they're talking about are like, you know, government contractor machines or extremely high-level U.S. corporation type accounts. I mean, we're talking some serious stuff here. Stuff that, once uncovered, can be used as blackmail.
Well, specifically, when we saw H.B. Gary had a number of zero-day exploits that they had found that they were just sitting on specifically for using to compromise machines like this.
Yeah.
And, you know, there's no reason to think that other places and other governments are not doing the exact same thing and using those zero-day exploits to compromise machines and not telling anybody about the exploit so that they can continue to do so.
It's like when Standard Oil used to go around and dig up these really dirty secrets about CEOs of their competitors or things like that. Only now you're able to either do it and hold their own customers' data hostage, and that's really what you're doing here is you're holding some sort of intellectual digital property hostage. It could be your user passwords database. It could be just something information about policies your company's engaged in, and then you're getting them through exploitations in software on client machines.
Yeah, or in a lot of cases. In some of these cases, all they're doing is monitoring what the hackers are doing. And so then they go to the company and it's like, you've been hacked. If you pay us, we'll tell you what data they managed to steal.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? So like they're watching
they're
them
able
already.
to basically just watch what's happening. And they're not offering to stop the hackers.
It's like if Superman were to sit back. Superman were to sit back and watch the bank be robbed, and then call the bank manager and be like, "So I see you're currently getting robbed right now. They're in your vault. Would you like me to fly in there and take care of that? It's going to be $200." You know, it's like seriously, like if you have the means to monitor, then you probably also have the means to alert somebody right away of what's going on.
Yep.
Yeah. So it's kind of shady. It's a shady business practice, but it's also one that, like, I'm surprised I didn't think of myself. It seems totally doable. You know what I mean? Like, dang, I look at that and I go, I know the tools to find out what vulnerabilities people have. I don't know exactly how to watch these hacker groups, but I suppose if you just combined watching the right mailing lists and the right forums and the right IRC rooms and the right 4chan channels.
What these bots do is, or these groups do is they take apart the malware. So they find an infected machine and they, instead of taking it offline, they take apart the malware and figure out how it works.
Oh, so by reverse engineering the code, they see what host it's talking to.
So they connect to the command and control server and just sit and watch what commands are being given out.
Of course.
I've actually done this. When somebody tried to do a little Perl-based
oh, really?
remote bot thingy on one of my web servers. One of my customers had a vulnerable PHP app that they installed. And so as this user, there's this Perl script running that was connecting to IRC and then receiving commands to go scan other hosts for the same PHP vulnerability.
Yep.
So I managed to get in there as myself on IRC, pretending to be one of the bots and seeing what commands they give me and see what other hosts are infected.
Yeah.
And see what they were targeting and what they were doing.
Huh. And were you able to... Or was it just for the sort?
Eventually, they figured out that I wasn't a bot when I didn't.
Yeah. It's funny how many of these things use IRC to relay the instructions back to the client. Yep. It's one of the most absolutely got to be the most common methods, and you almost have to wonder if...
it's a good distribution method for one-to-many.
But then shouldn't system administrators block IRC ports outbound? Wouldn't that take care of...
It's easy to run IRC on a different port.
Oh, that's true. That's true. And they could just code that into the... Heck, they could run it on 80.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And it depends. Like, some of them will try to hide on real IRC networks, or some of them will set up private networks on different ports. And
true, too. You could your zombie could connect to a room that's like... Heck, you could have bots hanging out in the Jupiter Broadcasting room waiting to give out instructions.
Right.
It doesn't have to be like super secret anonymous chat room.
Some intrusion detection systems will look for IRC in the outbound data streams. And if they see certain commands or whatever, they'll say, hey, that machine might be infected with a virus because it's trying to go on IRC.
So this story.
So what a lot of the bots do now is they connect to IRC over SSL so that intrusion detection systems can't read the packets.
This story kind of opens my eyes in terms of how these common methods that just general hackers use or general attackers use are being exploited by commercial entities to make money now. This RSA leak stuff is a fascinating read. I swear, I said this when I tweeted it out. It seems like it's right out of the movies. Like some sort of elite band of hackers compromise a site through using some sort of known trick exploit, and they get the data, and now they leverage over powerful governments and powerful corporations, and it just seriously seems like it's right out of the movies. And it's a fascinating read. We have a link to the full paste bin dump in our show notes.
No.
Anything you want to cover on the story?
No, I think that's pretty much it.
All right, Alan, you know what that means. It means it's time to move on to the TechSNAP feedback. Okay, Alan, our first question comes from Dreamvoid, who happens to be in the chat room right now. And Dreamvoid asks, I have a server set up, and I'm wondering what it would take to set up a backup server that would automatically take over if the first server were to go down. And what were some of the ways that I might be able to accomplish this? So a failover.
Yeah, and there are a number of different ways, and each one has pros and cons.
Now, Dreamvoid didn't say what OS. Dreamvoid, if you're in the chat room, you might want to mention that out, but... What do you got for us, Alan?
Well, he mentioned that the servers are blank right now, and so he's open to trying different things.
Oh, okay. So I guess you're probably going to take it from a FreeBSD angle on this.
My first option is yes, but two of my other options are completely OS agnostic. They would even work for Windows.
Oh, okay.
And actually, this one I'm talking specifically about the FreeBSD system, but there is a similar thing for Linux. I just can't remember what it's called right now.
Okay. Maybe if somebody in the chat room, I'll watch the chat room while you list off somebody has the name, I'll grab it for you.
But specifically, this question has a lot of answers, and most of them are quite lengthy. So I'm going to break it up, and I'll cover a different possible solution each week for the next couple of weeks.
I love that idea.
Yeah.
That's gonna be
it's the question that won't go away.
Okay, so let's get started. So what do you think the first, your first crack at this week, what do you have?
I have CARP. The Common Address Redundancy Pool.
CARP, huh?
Or protocol. Or
also a fish.
Yes. So this was originally designed by OpenBSD, but is available on FreeBSD. And basically what it is you make a virtual interface that has a shared IP address. So on your two or more servers that you're putting in your redundancy pool, you have the same IP address. Each machine still requires its own unique IP address. But the one you're going to point the service at, whether that's a website or if it's a router or whatever, is shared between all the machines. And then those machines take turn. Those machines broadcast the virtual MAC address for that virtual adapter, so that all the traffic goes to that machine. Now, normally you would get a conflict if all the machines try to have the IP address at the same time.
Sure.
So what happens is when you configure the secondary and the tertiary servers, you give them what's called an advertisement skew. So instead of all broadcasting that they control this IP address at the same time, you have the second one wait 100 milliseconds off the regular timer. So what it does is the first server broadcasts, I'm using this IP address. When the second and third server see that, they don't send out a broadcast. But if 100 milliseconds goes by and it doesn't see that, then it says, I'm using this IP address. And so then that IP address moves from the first server to the second server. And then you would configure your third server with a 200 millisecond delay.
And that's nice because then you don't have to worry about firewall changes or anything like that because it's all still going to the same destination.
Yeah, the destination IP is the same. And if it's a website where your connections are, it's stateless, right? If any information that is passed by a cookie or whatever, means that, if the first request goes to the one server and then that server goes down, when they click to the next page and it hits the second server, it doesn't matter. Unless you get more complicated when you can start getting databases involved, but that's beyond the scope of this question.
Right. So this CARP system only works on FreeBSD, did you say? Because only familiarity I have with it is on OpenBSD, so I guess it'd probably be any of the BSD variants.
Yeah, OpenBSD is where it was invented, but the same code was copied over and is now part of FreeBSD.
Ah,
So I think definitely those two, and maybe all BSDs can do carp.
okay. Seems pretty nice.
And so yeah, and then it's up to you to decide whether once the primary server comes back up, if it should take over the IP again right away, or if it should stay down. This is up to you depending on, if you fail over to the second machine, do you have to sync that data back to the first machine before you want it to take over again?
Right. So the data is a whole nother aspect of this. I mean, really,
Yes,
if you got two different systems.
Right. Like if it's a website that uses a database, then that database needs to be on another machine, and you have to handle redundancy for that entirely separately.
Yeah.
And that's how the scale engine system works, is that we actually have 9 servers that run the PHP code, and they're connected to a separate pool of database servers.
Right.
And then all of that shares a separate pool for storage.
So then if the reason you do the separate pool for storage is so that way whichever one is acting as the primary there can grab that same shared storage, so they're working off the same set.
Right. It's specific for those 9 separate PHP nodes all need to work off the same source code for your website.
Right.
And if a change is made to one of those files, like you uploading an image to your WordPress, that has to exist for all 9 nodes.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why we do the separated storage.
This is exactly the same problem you might have if you're trying to do like a virtual infrastructure. Say you have a couple of VirtualBox systems or VMware boxes, and you want to be able to start those VMs on a couple of different servers, shared storage again. It's sort of, you're solving the same problem here.
Exactly.
So you are using carp in the scale engine setup?
For the inbound to our 2 main load balancers, use carp so the traffic coming in, like to JupyterBroadcasting.com, carp, we have failover so that if our primary load balancer goes down, it fails over to the secondary.
Okay.
But we don't use it for the MySQL servers. We just use a pool of servers for that.
Right. That's pretty awesome.
So carp has a couple of requirements. Specifically, you would need identical services and identical content on the 2 servers.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't want to have your carp set up to fail over your website from the web server to the mail server,
and not have
if
Apache.
the mail server doesn't have Apache running.
Yeah. Right? That would suck.
Or if it has different files for the website, then all of a sudden your website changes, and that doesn't make sense.
Yep.
So carp works best for things that are stateless. So things that don't have to maintain consistent information.
Or come up with some sort of clever way to, on a routine basis. Like, there could be circumstances where if a system went down, as long as you could go back 30 minutes in time with data, you might be okay. Like if you had like an internal intranet system and maybe you had a lot of users on there. And if you lost 30 minutes of work, yeah, that sucks. Sally has to repost the thing about the new numbers for the accounting department, but, big deal.
Right, yeah. And
and then you could do like a cron job in rsync or something like that to keep data between 2 boxes.
And that's actually how the first I think next week or the week after when we talk about doing DNS failover for servers that aren't in the same location, that's how I've done it in the past with rsync.
So pfsync is being mentioned by Warfox in the chat room, and I've heard that mentioned in conjunction with carp.
I'm going to get to that in just a second.
Oh, all right. Oh, how exciting.
So one of the other requirements of carp is that the machines have to be on the same LAN because they're sharing an IP address.
Sure.
And that only happens within the same broadcast domain, right?
Yep.
So if your servers are not at the same physical location on the same LAN or in the same VLAN, then you need a different solution.
Mm-hmm.
And
or something that can forward the packets between the 2 VLANs or subnets or something. Yeah.
And so we'll talk about some of those solutions another week.
Ooh.
But so
I like
carp
that.
works best for the stateless type protocols, and one of the examples is redundant routers, which I've set up with pfSense before.
Yes,
so
same.
If you're using FreeBSD or a derivative of it, such as pfSense for a router, you can use carp to host the virtual IP that your DHCP server gives out to all the clients. So if you have a big office with like 200 computers in it, you don't want that all running off with just one router that might go down.
Mm-hmm.
So you have the IP address all those machines look for to pass traffic is your carp IP, and your 2 or more routers each have their own unique IP separately.
Oh, nice. So the client's DHCP router setting is a virtual address.
Yeah, and that virtual address moves between the different routers to whichever one is up.
That's a great idea.
Now, your routers are not necessarily completely stateless. If you're using NAT, if your NAT table isn't in sync,
Right.
then when you fail over to the second router that doesn't have that NAT entry, it's going to close your connection.
You're going to drop those connections, yeah. But that in some circumstances, that might not be so bad.
Yeah, and as if in our second example, that's actually a requirement. But if pfSense has a protocol called pfSync that allows your 2 or more routers to sync their NAT tables.
Oh, that's cool.
So, the master is always pushing its NAT table to the slave. So if the master goes down, when this traffic kicks over to the slave, it has all the NAT entries, and your traffic continues, and the users don't notice. The other option is setting
that is so
it up.
neat.
Yes. The other option is setting up your 2 routers with different ISPs, right? If you have 2 different internet connections in case one goes down, then you don't want to sync your NAT tables because the outbound IP address will be different. And so you will have to suffer with that momentary disconnect, but your internet's still up.
I would love to just do this for my house. At one point I had a Comcast business line and a Frontier Fios line, and I would love to have some sort of failover between the two, because if our internet connection goes down, the network's essentially, I can't post any shows, I can't do anything live. I would love to do something like this just here in the studio.
Your Wirecast would get disconnected, but it would auto-reconnect, and you'd be all set.
I'd be fine.
Yep.
Boy, I'd love to look into that. And I love pfSense too.
Yeah. And then the reason why you might want this failover setup is even if, if you set up pfSense and leave it alone, it's really not going to go down randomly unless, hardware
something
fails.
dies, yeah.
Right. But you may have to take it down to upgrade the OS, right? Or a newer version of pfSense.
Or throw another NIC in there or something like that.
Yeah, anything like that. So if you have 2 of them, you can just shut one of them down. Everything will fail over to the second one. And then you can upgrade the OS, do your maintenance on it, and then bring it back up, and then do the same for the second one.
Man, that's great.
Yep.
I would almost want to seriously consider using this here at the studio. I really like that.
Yep. And the last thing was there's an option in CARP called preempt, which comes in handy specifically in that example of 2 ISPs. So in your pfSense box, the router interface with CARP on it is your inside, your LAN side. But so if the ISP NIC goes down, CARP's still going to say that, I'm up, right?
Right.
But with the preempt option, what happens is when CARP detects one NIC going down, it disables the CARP NIC. So the router whose ISP just went down will take itself offline, and you'll fail.
So you don't even have to wait for the box to be physically offline. It has the intelligence to detect that the other end of its connection is down.
Exactly.
Oh, that is elegant.
You can have it happen with software too. So if it's a web server, you can have a script that monitors your Apache, and if it's overloaded, or if Apache stops responding, or anything bad happens, your script can automatically trigger CARP to take down that interface. It'll fail over.
This is a beautiful example of how open source, while on the surface and from the very high level, is very desperate, very not desperate, but desperate or whatever is it, spread out, right? It's just all little tools everywhere, scattered might be a better term. But then you look at the way you can bring in through standards, CARP using pfSync can use another protocol to shut down the Apache server that might be down and fire up another Apache server. I mean, the way you can do this systems integration with all these tools is because it's all open source and standards based. And it's really, when you really zoom in and get down to the nuts and bolts of it, it can be more integrated than a solution approach from like a Microsoft or some other proprietary vendors.
Actually, CARP is just a free implementation of a similar system from Cisco.
So there you go.
Yeah,
which is probably pretty good stuff.
I forget if it was CARP or the pfSync part. One of the two tried to get a protocol number for the protocol from IANA or whatever, and they got turned down, so they just piggyback on the Cisco one.
Oh, there you go. That sometimes makes it easier.
There's a whole political thing about it. It's because it's an open source project, the Standards Association didn't want to give them a protocol number.
I mean, I just love the idea that you could have an entire system that would be sort of, in a sense, self-aware of its connectivity and help recover an Apache from an Apache outage, or help a network recover from a downed internet connection. I mean, talk about dramatically increasing your availability with free tools.
Yeah.
Just a little time, I
maybe
guess.
once I've done a bit more research on it, I want to talk a little bit about HAST, H-A-S-T, which is a similar system for storage, where you're basically replicating a whole hard drive, a block device.
Yeah. Yeah. Should we jump on the next question? Are you ready?
Time for the next question.
The next question comes from Mati. What does it say? Martius? I can't see it from here.
Matthias.
Let's go with that. Okay, we'll go with that. He wrote in and said, I've been using the NoScript add-on for Firefox and I've become aware of just how many sites use Google Analytics. Is this a good way for a website admins to track visitors, or is it just a way for Google to track everyone? It's a good question.
A little bit of both, but mostly it's a really powerful tool for website administrators. I know that I use it and Chris uses it.
I do, yeah.
And it gives you a lot of data.
Yeah, it helps you gauge what people like and what people don't like, and it helps you kind of figure out like if you do something, is it successful? Like I'll give you an example. We didn't have an iPad, an iPhone, an Android specific version for our website because I thought the site renders just fine on these mobile browsers. So why not just give them the full page? And that was pretty much my philosophy for like the last year. And then about 2 months ago, I implemented this new mobile theme. And the only way I could really gauge if that was successful is by using Google Analytics. I saw a massive spike in iPad traffic. And it clicked. Oh, okay. People really responded well to that change. There was no other way for me to gauge that, really. You could use other tools. It doesn't have to be Google Analytics, but it's free, right?
Yes. Google Analytics is actually just a cloud-hosted version of a product called Urchin, which Google acquired a couple of years ago. So this was originally a product that you paid for, and it was, a very advanced analytics program. And Google still sells it, but they don't sell it directly. You have to buy it from like a consulting firm that deals with Ukraine.
The other thing, though, that Google does is they'll hook it in like with their AdWords campaigns and stuff.
Yes,
so you can see from like, okay, I placed an ad on the Google search results. They clicked on it. They went here. Was there engagement? You can set up like all of these goals and these thresholds to monitor. I don't use any of that stuff, but...
Well, but especially if you're doing e-commerce, it can be very powerful.
Yes.
Basically, you can tie where I put the ad and what the keyword for it was. Then you see, all right, the user came and looked at the product. And then if they bought the product, you can even tell Google, they bought product number 37 and they paid this much money for it. And then through that, Google can tell you, all right, you're paying 10 cents a click for the ads. You're getting this percentage conversion rate, and that results in this many sales. Are you paying more for each click than you're making off the number that are actually turning into sales, or the other way around?
Right.
So,
now, isn't that kind of also the creepy side, which sort of fits in with the question? This is a lot of data. So Google's got at this point they've got your IP, they got your location, they got your if you're doing the merchant side of things, they've got you from beginning to end of the transaction.
Yeah. Well, it depends. The merchant usually just sends some identifier of the product, not necessarily the whole product name or whatever.
Okay, that's better.
That's up to the store, really, if they want to track it by their internal product ID from their database, or if they're actually, sending the part number.
Right. So, and then you combine it with the AdWords network, so they know when you go to a site that has AdWords and Google Analytics, that's probably a whole nother layer of information. And any site that has Google Analytics on, they also get your IP.
Yep.
So it does give Google it's a sensor net for Google is what it is.
But mostly all that information that it would give Google there is how effective the advertisement was. Right? If you click through this ad and you actually buy something, this ad is better than this other ad where people click through, but it turns out it was, the ad was misleading and nobody bought anything. And so even though they make less money off the ad, they push the more effective ad to the top.
And another way that I have used it is we've kicked around the idea, should we do like a meetup in Seattle sometime? Like go down to one of the there's a bunch of great bars in downtown Seattle, and have a Jupiter Broadcasting fan meetup. And that's an expense. It's a lot of time. It's something we really have to think about. And one of the things you can do in Google Analytics is we can drill down and see how many website visitors do we have in the Seattle area. And then from that, we could potentially extrapolate a rough estimation of how many people might show and those kinds of things. So it's good for all kinds of data.
Yep.
Including even like how fast is your site going, like page speed stuff.
Yeah, and so if you're concerned as a company about giving away that data to Google, you can buy the Urchin product and run it on a server.
Oh.
and have it not give the data to Google.
Well, and there's lots of third-party stats people out there.
And there are a lot of other plugins and similar tools. A lot of them aren't quite as good, but Urchin is a lot better than a log analyzer like Ostats. But
yeah, there's that too. You could always just go off your own Apache logs with that. I really want to give a plug for Woopra. I don't know what the price breakdown is anymore. It's not very expensive, though, and I think they even have a free package. But the thing that's cool about Woopra is its real-time engagement stats. So you can see where people are going on your website in real time. As they click a link, it shows up on a dashboard, and you get an overview of the activity on your site. So you can see what's working immediately, which is great. Like if you just do a big post and you want to blast it out to all of your friends and social networks, you can see if that's being well responded to or whatnot in real time. Google Analytics and a lot of other services are generally about 24 hours behind because they analyze the logs in one big batch process and then give you the results, whereas Woopra, Woopra.com, is all in real time. And if you have a small site, I think you can just use it for free. I think you're not sending stuff to Google.
And yes, the thing you lose out on with most like Apache logs is it can't tell you what size their screen was or, what version of Flash they had.
Right.
Now, some things
too.
like Ostats have a JavaScript bit that you embed in your page that adds that data to the Ostats data.
Oh, okay.
And that can help. But yes, Google Analytics is a very nice product.
Yeah. So, I have a, what's it called? I'll see if I can, I don't remember. Crap, there is a plugin for like all of the browsers, I think, but I've used it in Chrome. And it gives you notification of all the different tracking services that websites are using. And I found out that I didn't really realize that the Discuss comment system must be pulling some sort of their own analytics too. And I don't know if they're telling anybody or if that plugin is just registering it wrong. But according to the plugin I've been running, whenever I go to a blog like our own that has Discuss comments, it's claiming it's doing some sort of analytics tracking. Don't know. I don't really care. But, I mean, it's, what are they going to get my IP? I don't block any of that stuff because I do feel like it's useful for the web administrators. That's my take on it.
Yep.
So should we move on to the next one or any thoughts?
Yes, but I say it's not giving Google that much more data than they already had.
Yeah, that's true.
They were going to know most of it anyway.
They are the Google
service out of it.
Yeah. All right, so Leon writes in a question. He says, hi, guys. He says, thanks for answering my question a few weeks ago regarding spam filtering. I don't know if some of you might remember that we did a little Q&A on Spam Assassin and sort of went through Alan's setup and some of the things I've tried before. He says, my question is this, though. Hey, Alan, by the way, he ended up going with a free BSD setup because of the talk on TechSNAP. That's pretty cool. He says, my question is this. What's the best way to keep your free BSD ports up to date? Just checking it manually when going, like right now I can go to the security mailing list or I can browse around in forums and things like that. But is there anything that Alan uses to automatically update his servers? And again, thanks for the great shows. He's been watching for a long time, and he said that he's even going to support us with a monthly subscription. How cool is that?
Very cool.
So what do you use, Alan, to keep your FreeBSD box up to date?
There's a service called VU XML, the Vulnerability and Exposure Markup Language.
Yeah.
And it's basically an XML file that tells you about all the latest vulnerabilities. And FreeBSD has this built into the ports tree where if you install the XML file, every time you go to install a port, if that port is vulnerable, it will stop you from installing it.
Oh, so it like checks this feed?
Yeah. And to keep the ports tree itself up to date, there's a tool called TechSNAP. It comes in as part of FreeBSD, and that downloads the latest snapshot of the ports tree.
That's what I've used.
It uses Colin Percival's BSDiff algorithm to only download the changes you need. So the very first time you download the whole 50 megabytes or whatever, but every other time it's a very small update. And it has a built-in cron method where you cron tab it to run at midnight or whatever, but it will randomly sleep for up to an hour, so a random time between 1 second and 1 hour, so that when everybody cron tabs it for midnight, it doesn't hit the servers all at the same time and break everything.
So this seems like it's like FreeBSD's version of Windows Update, where you can say install critical or info level, whereas like in Linux, when you do an apt-get update, it's sort of just a grab bag of all of the updates in the repo.
Well, it's slightly separate. There's a tool called FreeBSD Update that does the OS, and a separate tool, TechSNAP, that does the ports tree.
Just the ports tree, which is stuff that's outside of the mainline FreeBSD distro.
Everything that's outside of the actual operating system.
Okay.
But that includes almost everything, except for FreeBSD itself.
And do you run into any issues with using this on production systems?
Now, I don't actually update my packages automatically. I always do that by hand.
Sure, yeah.
So TechSNAP updates your ports tree, which gives you all the latest installs for the apps, but it doesn't actually install anything. So then you need one of the tools. The tool I use is called Port Upgrade, but there are other tools like Port Manager and Port Master and a bunch of other ones. And these basically, what Port Upgrade does is it can scan all the apps you have installed, compare that to the ports tree and say, these ones are out of date, and I'll rebuild them. And it has the option to look for binary packages instead of doing them all from source. Because especially if you have like X installed, if it's like a desktop, and you have, KDE installed, you don't want to build KDE from source. It will take ages.
Yeah, I tried that.
So you can grab the package for that.
So do you think then that if somebody was to go about, I guess what I would say to you is, wouldn't somebody, if they were really concerned about security, and I don't know what is exactly packaged in FreeBSD, but it would seem like you would just stick with the FreeBSD update tool and not really worry so much about the ports tree, unless do things like Apache and MySQL come from the ports tree?
Yes, everything that's not FreeBSD itself.
Okay.
So you do want to... now, FreeBSD has its own separate mailing list for the vulnerabilities, so you can just hit that one once and get the ones for everything in the ports tree, but that's a lot of stuff, right? There are 23,000 applications in the ports tree.
I realize we might be putting the non-FreeBSD users to sleep right now. They might be rolling their eyes with the FreeBSD stuff. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. But it's pretty cool that based on the recommendation, he went out and grabbed and went into FreeBSD. That's pretty hardcore move to take when you're going into spam filtering. That's like going in full-fledged. But I think it's a good way to go.
But specifically, also, there's a separate tool to update your spam assassin rules that you should run every night.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
And that you would want to cron tab so that you grab the latest rules so that you don't get hit with the latest new type of spam.
Yeah. I wanted to give
the tool is called SA-update.
There you go. I wanted to give a shout out to Deathhawk in the IRC chat room because while we were chatting, he found the extension I was talking about. It's called Ghostry. And I put a link in the show notes underneath that question. And that you plug into your browser, and it tells you who's tracking what and what services they're reporting it to. And it's a free plugin for most browsers.
And somebody else mentioned in the chat room a service application called PWiki. Or PyWiki. It's an open source tool designed to try to be Google Analytics.
Oh.
Provide you the same data.
Okay, that's really cool. Yep. All right, should we move on to the next question?
Yep.
All right, the next question comes in from Dan. And Dan says he was all excited when he saw we were doing a Q&A. He was going to send this directly to me, but he said he'd email it right in. He said, I might as well send it here to TechSNAP. Do you have any recommendations on sources for building websites? I've got a career move pending on to go to creation of websites, and I even have a deadline next week. I've done basic HTML, but not for about 6 years. Any tips would be greatly appreciated. He says, P.S. I've been watching for the last 2 years Jupiter Broadcasting content. Just got into TechSNAP recently. And his IRC handle is HonkBriff in the chat room, or something like that. HONCLBRIF. So say hi to him if you're in the JB Live chat room. So what do you think, Alan? Any tips for somebody that wants to get rolling on setting up a website? Maybe has some basic HTML skills, but that's probably about it.
There's a number of great open source content management systems, like WordPress, Drupal, Joomla, and so on.
Yeah.
Specifically, he mentions needing a forum type thing. So Drupal has that, whereas WordPress really doesn't.
Right.
And then he was talking about offering payment for stuff. Right? If you want to accept PayPal, each of the different platforms has plugins for that.
Lots of them.
But the WordPress one isn't really meant to be like a store. If you're going to have a store when you want to manage a list of products.
There's the WP e-commerce plugin that will do like categories and plugin. It's a plugin that will give you like a product library and stuff like that.
Right. So all of them have plugins, but basically I would say look at the plugins and get the features you want and choose the platform based on that. Seriously. Rather than trying to pick one of the 3 platforms and then find the solution that works for you.
I have found that you can really get a lot of great mileage out of WordPress. Now, I know there's some people who crap on it, but if you set it up right and you get good plugins and you use some of the caching plugins, you can really get a high-performance WordPress site. You can customize the heck out of them. There's tons of amazing themes out there.
Yep.
You know, my wife Angela has a website called momvault.com. She runs that on Squarespace, and they have like it's basically she just plugs in, okay, I want a form here on this page, and she just drops in a form block, and boom, now she's got a form. And I want sidebar links over here, and she drops in a block, and she could go customize the code if she wants to. But Squarespace, Squarespace is like, I don't know, $16 a month or something for hosting and their CMS. But they just implemented like bandwidth caps and storage caps and stuff like that. So you got to look into that. I would probably myself go WordPress or Drupal. It'd probably be.
Right. WordPress is more designed for a blog type website, but there's so many plugins, people kind of use it for almost anything. But it might not fit, especially if you need that forum type thing. It depends. If you just want like threaded comments or whatever, you can do the built-in one or something like Discuss. But if you want an actual forum, then maybe Drupal makes more sense. It depends how integrated you want it to be, because we have for Jupiter Broadcasting, you just have a separate forum. Yeah,
that's just been easier. A couple of suggestions out of the chat room. Acid Punk mentions that his hosting just one-click install for PHPBB, and I know, I've used GoDaddy hosting like crazy, where you get this. This isn't an ad from the Linux Action Show, but it's true. Right. You get all these apps that you just one-click install on GoDaddy hosting. Yeah, also, a plugin here for
a thing called Installatron that has all kinds of apps.
Installatron. There's also Shane Q is pointing out the Google App Engine could do some hosting, and it's free for basic usage.
Yep.
So that's also something to look into. So that's pretty good place to start. Anything else?
For this guy's needs, probably Drupal or Joomla is a little more flexible.
Yeah, for the forum stuff.
They can be slightly more complicated.
What about vBulletin? It's not free, but it lets you do a front page and a forum.
I don't know.
It does
about
payment gateway stuff.
Oh,
it does. It'll do. Well, it's subscription based. Like you could on a vBulletin system, you could have areas of the site that are only accessible to premium customers and things like that.
Right. Again, you want to kind of look at very specifically what feature you want, and then find the one that fits best.
I agree with you, man. I agree. All right, Alan. Will
WordPress, Drupal, and Joomla, they're all free. So
yeah, really. At least start there.
Yep.
Start there and see if it gets where you want, because you don't have to spend any money and you'll learn along the way. Although the week timeline with the 1 week deadline, you almost might want to go look at Squarespace, because it's probably going to get you rolling really fast. And they do have a form drop-in. So yeah, there you go. All right, Alan, what do you think? Time for the Bitcoin Blaster?
I think so.
All right, let's do it. I'll take the first story from Bitcoin, from the Bitcoin Blaster, and that is this is just a real good, feel-good story. And Mt. Gox, the world's largest Bitcoin exchange, has acquired the Bitmomat.pl, Bitromat. I forget how you pronounce it. But anyways, they're the ones that lost their wallet a couple of weeks ago, and of course, all of the Bitcoins in that wallet, which was a massive tragedy. But Mt. Gox has stepped up. They bought the company, and and part of the purchase reimburses everyone that lost their Bitcoins.
Yes. It seems here that specifically Mt. Gox is trying to keep confidence in the market up.
Mm-hmm. It would appear that way.
Because, if people keep having their Bitcoins lost and stolen all the time, then it's going to hurt the future of Bitcoin. So
it's definitely in their best interest.
Mt. Gox assumes they will make a lot more money in the long run if they can keep confidence up by solving problems like this.
They were also like the top contributor to the Humble Indie Bundle last time I checked.
Yes.
Which is really
and
cool.
Probably the reason why you could donate to that in Bitcoins instead of just...
I would think so, right?
Yep.
It seems like that's probably, they had something involved with that. Did you see that there's story out here, another story in the Bitcoin Blaster is, I kind of conjectured about this. I'd wondered if this would happen, but now we're seeing it, a GPU-based mining Trojan.
Yep.
It gets infected, just like any other Trojan out there, and then it starts banging on your GPU to mine for the attacker.
Right. Since quite a few machines now have at least a mid-range GPU, so basically the virus infects any computer, but hopes that a computer has a decent video card, and then starts mining on it.
I mean, I suppose every computer is going to have some sort of GPU in it, but every desktop is going to.
It has to be a recent AMD or
something with
NVIDIA.
OpenCL support, right? Is that what it has to have? Yeah.
Yeah.
And then this is kind of neat. It's just an interesting sign of where Bitcoin is heading, and it's a good indicator of Bitcoin's growth. Is there's an actual Bitcoin conference going on in New York starting on August 19th, so that's starting tomorrow when this episode comes out, and going through the 21st, being held in New York. It's going to have some interesting speakers. Saturday afternoon's keynote speakers are Gavin Anderson, the development lead of Bitcoin, and Stefan Thomas. He is the founder of WeUseCoins.com. And then this is interesting, Jeff Gerzik. I'm not sure the pronunciation there, of course. He's a member of the Bitcoin core development team and a Linux kernel developer. So that's some interesting keynote speakers at
Right,
the first
because
Bitcoin conference.
WeUseCoins.com was the guys that made that really nice video that we showed that explains what Bitcoins are.
And which has been embedded all over the web to nauseum. But I don't know. What do you think? Good sign?
There seems to be but it seems to be a conference for everything. I noticed there's one for Minecraft coming up as well.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of Minecraft players, so I can see it. But it does seem to be a sign of progress in the Bitcoin community. And something else, Alan, that we were talking about on the live stream, or maybe it was in our pre-show prep here, is this announcement from Trade Hill that just came out today. This is fresh. This is hot off the presses. Trade Hill is going to be taking over Bitcoin.com, and it's all kind of still in the early stages. I don't really know all the details, but it sounds like they'll be introducing an online wallet service. They're going to continue their exchange services, offering wire transfer payment options. They go on to talk about how they're investing in security and personnel and expertise, and that they're taking the responsibility of running Bitcoin.com extremely seriously. Like, it sounds like they're refocusing part of their business on this.
It seems like they want to, especially like we were saying, the tragedy with that Bitcoin wallet going down was that so many people that have managed to use Bitcoins to make regular transactions, like buying lunch, had used some wallet system because that was the only real way to be able to do it from your mobile. Yep.
So Bitcoin.com will be an online wallet, a vault service, mobile payments, and merchant services, all powered by Trade Hill.
Yes, because that was the other thing. That wallet service provided was an easier way for individual websites to implement accepting Bitcoins as payment.
Yep.
Right, because building that in the back end means running the Bitcoin client on the server, which on regular shared hosting isn't usually something you're allowed to do. And, trying to tie individual transactions back to the person that made them. Right? The point of Bitcoin is it's anonymous, but you need to somehow tie that to the order so that you can know whether that each individual order was paid for and which Bitcoins are which and so on.
Mm-hmm. You have to know if the customer has paid for his eggs before you go out and take the eggs to the table. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So I guess should we close maybe on just a couple of... I just want to share a couple of thoughts on Bitcoin. It seems like it's trending towards positive territory. It's $10.89 in the U.S. while we record this episode. Yep. And that was... I guess 2 weeks ago, it was almost down to like $5.
I think the lowest I saw was about 7 something, but yeah.
Either way, it does seem like things are going in a positive direction for Bitcoin.
Yeah, it does seem to be staying fairly stable around the $10 mark.
And you were kind of postulating earlier that you think part of this might be that people are sort of reinvigorated by the difficulty decreasing.
Yes, with the difficulty not being on a very sharp incline anymore.
Yeah.
And actually kind of slacking off by about 4%. Like the last couple times, the increases have been about like 10 to 12% every time.
Yeah.
And this time it went down by 4%.
And I guess a lot of people with some of the recent events and the difficulty rates going up and the price drop. I know, for me, I've pulled back. I've pulled back one of my machines that I had Bitcoin out here in the studio. I just turned it off. Because the money's gone
Another
down.
thing I noticed was that it was the first week where I managed 100% uptime. I didn't have any problems
with your
getting
pool?
the data to my pool.
Yeah.
Right? Because the only other time the difficulty didn't really go up was the week when there was attacks on like all the Bitcoin mining pools to the point where, that many people lost.
Yeah, so it didn't go up because the overall pool power was down. The overall network power. Yeah.
But now the network power is still growing and the difficulty is not skyrocketing on us.
Yeah, I guess I'm still a little nervous about the overall power usage. I have one of those deals with the power company where I pay like an average every month, so I haven't really seen the increase yet. But have you taken a look at your Bitcoin farm's power draw recently?
We pay a flat rate for circuits in the data center. So
do you get kind of any data on like how much you're pulling or anything?
Well, from our
I'm kind of nervous about it.
From our remote reboot unit, our one machine that runs 3 high-end video cards uses between 6 and 7 amps. Uses less than 1 when the video cards are off.
Oh, man. So I've got 1, 2,
Basically,
3.
I think it runs about 800 watts or 900 watts, depending.
That could be expensive. That could be like $10 a month here. Or more even. That could be more than that.
Well, at our 1250 megahashes per second rate, we're making 0.75 Bitcoins a day. So we're making like $7 a day.
See, I'm thinking
so
it could
paying off the power. If the power is only $7 or $14, then it's not a big deal.
No, yeah. If you're making $7 a day,
in our data center, a second circuit would be $400.
If you're making $7 a day, then it's definitely you're still breaking even. But
yeah,
is it true that is it maybe not just going to become more profitable to do smart investing? Like if you buy while Bitcoin's down, $200 in terms of direct purchase power at the low Bitcoin cost will yield me way more Bitcoins than months of Bitcoin mining.
Yeah, well, that's how I started it, was just that. And for a while also, I was looking at arbitrage. With all these different exchanges out there, sometimes the prices get out of whack.
Yeah, I noticed that.
Sometimes the Canadian exchange will give you like $1 more for your Bitcoins than empty GOX.
I've seen it where I could go sell my Bitcoins at another exchange for almost $1 more than other. It's like you can if you're looking to sell, really go over to the Bitcoin Market Watch and really pay attention to what the prices are at different exchanges, because there's sometimes a big difference.
And if you could do it quickly enough, what you would do is you would sell your Bitcoins or go to where the Bitcoins are cheaper, buy up a whole bunch of Bitcoins, take them and then transfer them to your wallet or to your deposit address at the other exchange, and then sell them at the higher price.
I know.
Until you've evened out the prices at the two markets.
Oh, man, as we're talking, of course, go figure, it looks like the markets are down for Bitcoin overall. But here's a great example. You see a couple of them are in the green. Here's an example right now of an exchange that while Mt. Gox is in the red and a bunch of the ones above it are in the red, this particular one is in the green, and you might make more money if you sold there.
Yep.
And that's bitcoincharts.com. So go check that out if you want to get a good overview. And it lets you put on filters. You can put on just Canadian dollar amounts or just U.S. or just, rubles, whatever you want. You can just put that filter on there and take a look. And that's bitcoincharts.com. Now, is there any other Bitcoin-related topics we should cover? I think it might be.
I don't think so.
I've decided I'm going to. I've kind of been running. I have a machine out here in the studio. I mentioned that I'm not mining on anymore, and that's kind of because I think the fan might be dying out a little bit. But I'm going to replace it eventually, and I'm still taking into consideration when I'm shopping for a video card what's going to make a good mining card, because why not?
Yep.
Why not? And I'm going to have to really investigate the power consumption, because that could be the hidden gotcha.
Yep.
I think Washington State, a lot of our power comes from hydropower. We have pretty good rates here, so I think I'm okay. But I still got to look into it. It's a responsible thing to do. You know what I mean?
Yep.
There you have it. All right, Alan. Well, I think that wraps up this episode of TechSNAP, right?
Yeah.
There, boom. Let's give you a little bit of information. If you'd like to watch TechSNAP live, like we mentioned earlier in the show, you can do that over at JB Live at 1 p.m. Pacific on Thursdays. And you can also download this show every single week, Friday mornings, over at jupiterbroadcasting.com. I try to make it available in just about any format you might want. iPod, HD, audio only. And we even have a fancy new HTML5 video player, which you can watch this in super high internet definitions.
Yeah.
You like that? Internet definitions. It's a term that really is very vague, so it could mean anything.
Yes.
Set those expectations low, I always say. Right, Alan? Okay, maybe not for the show, though. In fact, join us next week. We're doing a network monitoring and server monitoring, a whole episode about Nagios. I'll probably talk a little bit about SpiceWorks and a few other tools I've used. And it's a fascinating topic, so you'll want to tune in and catch that next Friday over at Jupiter Broadcasting. Yeah,
maybe the solution we'll do for the answer to the question would be how to have Nagios trigger something changing in your network.
Yeah. If Nagios notices something, how do you get Nagios?
Something's down, have Nagios cause your network to reconfigure.
Have your network auto-heal itself. Maybe we'll cover that next week. All right, everyone. Well, thanks so much for tuning into this week's episode of TechSNAP, and we'll see you next week.